Okay, hello. This video should be recording. Hello, my name is Michael Dauchi, and my topic is electric induction and electrical cars. Um, okay, so, oops, okay, I'm going to be reading the PowerPoint on a separate slide on my laptop and recording this for you. Okay, so the agenda for what my final proposal is going to be about. It's going to go the abstract, the intro and background, objectives, results, budget, timeline, looking to the future, conclusion, and references at the end. So, my abstract is as follows. Electrical cars are convenient and convenient to use, and the amount of them is increasing in the world. Like anything electronic, they need to be charged. The objective is to make a device that can charge an electric car wirelessly and functions in a home garage. This device this device that we've created will save people from forgetting to charge their car at night, and they can just park their car in the garage and the device will start charging. So the introduction. Electric induction is a process that creates a magnetic field from a coil with current running through it. So generally it's called wireless charging as a general term. So if a device is put near a coil with the current, then a magnetic field will flow through the current. It'll go through, make a magnetic field, and will charge something on the opposite side. So basically it just excites the energy and it will put a charge from one side to another through the air using a magnetic field. That's the general gist of that. Electric cars are still new on the market, but they obviously need something to charge. So, obviously, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it, the main one being just to plug it in, kind of like you're pumping gas, or you can also use this new method, which is electrical induction, to pull up onto a parking pad and it will just wirelessly charge the car by just being on top of it. So the objectives, there's going to be in several phases, and phase one would be the research and preparation. So of Toyota, Tesla, and Ford, it was more or less which one of those is the best convenient car to use for wireless charging, and to research then the effectiveness of certain metals, circuitry, the actual components that we're going to be using that we use to make the actual device itself. Then research the measurement of what's the best ratio to coil, the number of coils, how big the coils should be in order to make the best magnetic charge to charge the car efficiently. And lastly is to purchase everything that's needed based on all the previous results of research. Then phase two being the creation and installation phase, which is we would then design the device and the circuitry involved, make a blueprint, figure out what we're going to do, then actually physically create the device, then lastly install it so that it can be tested for use of an actual car from the aforementioned places Tesla, Ford, and different locations like that. Lastly, phase three would be the testing and improvement. So more or less it's going to be we will pull a car onto it, we will test it to see how good it charges or doesn't charge properly. We will check that, we will record the results, and then we will go and improve the design to make it more efficient, potentially smaller, a whole bunch of different little small details, to which realistically there wasn't a whole bunch, but still, just to test everything, it would be useful just to make it slightly more efficient in any way, shape, or form. The methodology, just for a simple thing, I've already kind of described it, but for the most part, it would be a mat that you'd pull your car on top of it. It would be a mat, basically, similar to wireless charging for your phone. You would just go and you would take it, you'd take your phone and you would drop it onto basically a little platform or a little thing that you have on your desk or wherever, and then that will excite a coil, which then will make a magnetic field and will charge the battery in your device. Same thing with the car. There's basically a box on the ground or a device on the ground, basically a mat that would have coils into it. It would then make a magnetic field going upwards into the actual car itself. The battery would charge that, and that's basically how that would charge that. Instead of having to actually physically go and plug it in, you would just pull your car on top of it like a parking spot, park it, put it in park, get out of the car, and enjoy the rest of your day, and it will be charging and be charged by the time you get back. So after creating it and all that stuff, the results in total, basically, it works better than expected, actually. The device can charge the vehicles in a little under 5 hours. That's rough estimates. Um, Basically, it was planned for just you would do it overnight. Obviously, most nights are not just 5 hours of sleep, so it will be done well before you're awake, actually. There were a few time delays, unfortunately, with the different phases. Just there's little hiccups here and there. Um, in phase the 1.1, which was the checking for the to the cars and which car is the best one, some of the companies they had to set up meetings and get the actual facts for us. We didn't immediately walk in and get the results required. So unfortunately, that took couple extra days, about 3, mainly just because they had to make sure they got all the proper results to give to us, so they didn't give us any false claims. Um, and then, secondly, in 1.4, the actual buying process, not every store and process to actually get the components to make the device, they didn't all have all of them immediately. So, unfortunately, some of those took a couple extra days for them to actually get the circuitry and everything for us to actually make it. So, unfortunately, we should have realistically uh, planned slightly farther ahead and bought it in advance, but unfortunately, we just did it the more or less expecting day of. That didn't quite work out, unfortunately. Then phase 2, the actual building of it, basically went within the general time frame that was allotted, which will be talked about later in a slide or two. Then, lastly, in phase 3, the actual testing, it was a couple extra days just to make sure that we took out every little possible kink and bug, and just to make sure that it was under the 5-hour mark. That's just more or less what we were at. We just wanted to make sure it was just slightly under there. And other than the little bit of time added on to with those 3 little hiccups, the device was created and performs perfectly, other than those little time delays. So the project budget, there's the different phases, and then the labor at the bottom. Phase 1 was $5,000 roughly, and then it's more or less just to get people's time information. Would be the $200 for inquiring just about cars in general, just to get the information out there, potentially look at the cars, which ended up happening. The most efficient metal circuitry, just to test them. We can test them, or other people. Doesn't really matter specifically. Get the measurements for the coils to yet again buy components and understand how it works, basically. It's kind of vague. But then lastly, the actual buying of the components of the $4,000, just to make sure that we actually have the real components and everything. The creation of the actual device would be $5,000, mainly because of blueprints being a simple portion. The actual creating of the device will need specific actual tools that just a normal person would not have, and we have to rent those and use those to create the device. The installation then would also be, we have to find a place in order to use it, because more than likely it would not fit in the lab area, so we have to find a specific person. We might have to pay to use their house or use like a home scenario, basically. Then testing and improvement, the last one, $1,000. Generally, it's just little bits and pieces here and there, just to make sure that everything's upgraded and everything is perfect, to test different conditions using different amounts of electricity, different flows, depending on the type of garage, what their electricity is, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, the labor. I, for the most part, took what it costs for a regular engineer, generally for like, I think it was roughly $60,000, and then I did that for roughly the weeks that we're going to be doing it, which is 4 weeks. So I just basically just took it down, and and also for 3 different engineers, and then eventually I got to the 13,000 roughly would be how much that would be. So yeah, roughly I think it goes to 24,000 roughly, somewhere within that range. Here's the pie chart, obviously the labor being the big chunk on the left, and for the most part it's kind of convenient in terms of the way that everything's set up. There's the red one in the very top center, and then it slowly goes around for each step, and eventually ends up with the labor, the big massive one on the left. So I've mentioned all the values in the previous slide, and you can check back if need be. The different timelines, for the most part, I have it so that there's the phase 1, 2, and 3, and I have the different durations in days, and then individual steps. So unfortunately, a couple of them are a little bit longer, just for different reasons. The 1.1, 1.4, and just generally the third phase in general were slightly longer, but otherwise you can see the different days. And roughly, I just did it off of the idea of the beginning of November to the beginning of December, roughly. November being the whole time frame, roughly. And then Ant chart, just so you can see that for the most part, it is phase 1 is that top bar. Then the next 4 of them will be just increment times of that. Same thing with the next big bar in the center is phase 2, and it fills up there. And the last one being basically the testing and then the recording of it they're going to be happening at the same time. You're obviously not going to test it and then record everything from memory. You're going to be doing it at the same time. So that's the reason they're at the same time. And then lastly, do the improvements, which also realistically can be done multiple times just to make sure everything is perfect. Then looking to the future, based on the results of this, basically the process of the electrical induction is extremely useful. Just basically, it can bridge gaps just wirelessly, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to have a physical connection being plugged in. You can just use electrical induction, which realistically is becoming a major selling point for phones and cars and different things like that. So, and obviously the slight differences of what we could have done differently would be to preemptively do some research and buy things sooner, and a few little here's and there's basically. The conclusion. This device is wireless charging is about convenience, and this device allows that. The device will not take up a lot of room and will be able to charge an electric car overnight, or in this case, under 5 hours, without the need for cords. The space that a cord for plugging in would take up an entire wall and spill out into the garage, take up a lot of space. This one's just a simple mat. Basically, it's just a normal parking spot. You wouldn't notice any difference for the most part. This will be a smaller, easier, and more effective way to charge electric cars. And I've mentioned this before, but we've collectively made a wireless car for a charging device, and it works better than expected. You can charge in less than a little under 3 hours, or 5 hours. And the other time that added on, besides the other extra time, everything works perfectly. And then lastly, at the end, you can read the references and citations, which will be the same as the previous one, but still, there's the references. Okay, thank you and have a nice Christmas. Bye-bye.